All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, very well then. We can go ahead and bring in the jury, please. Oh, wait.
Did we want clean copies of the jury instructions?
I just emailed them to the clerk and she's actually stapling them now as we speak. But do you want them before you argue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we'll wait a minute.
So, just, what was our schedule? I don't know if did I miss that, or do we even talk, do we plan on taking?
We'll take a break between
Break
arguments
between.
at this point. I mean, how long do you think you'll argue?
I think it'll be a while. So,
Why don't we go, you need a quick break now, but then we'll take a break between your arguments.
yes, sir. That would be appropriate anyway, because I have things to put up anyway.
All right. If you need to be excused for a moment, and as soon as everybody's back, we'll
Okay.
go and bring it. All right, good morning. I see all members of the jury are present. Please make sure that we got the right notebooks back to the right chair, and that I'll give you a second to make sure that your notebooks, you have notebooks and pens and that sort of thing, and get settled in. As I said to you yesterday, all the evidence in this case has been presented, and it's now time for the attorneys to make their final or closing arguments to you. These final arguments are a lot like the opening statements that you heard last week, and by that I mean these final arguments are not evidence, and you're not to consider what is said by an attorney in a final argument as evidence. The evidence was offered over the course of the trial over the last number of days, but these arguments are not evidence, and if the attorney attempts to restate a portion of the evidence during their argument, and your recollection of the evidence is different from that of the attorney, you are to be guided by your recollection of the evidence in your deliberations. In this matter, the state will argue to you first, and at the conclusion of that argument, we will hear from the defense. Mr. Sachs, the jury is with the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We started this tragic case last week. Monday, y'all came in for a jury service. Heard that y'all were going to be here for a while because we had a rather big, rather important case for you all to hear. And so we started this case talking about Jacob, about 3-year-old Jacob becoming an orphan during that first hour of January the 5th of 2013. And so now we've dug through all the evidence. You're starting to see some of the facts, and you're starting to find some of the truth that might be behind a lot of these things that you heard about. And seeing that one dating relationship, one dating breakup may have led to a series of escalating events which ended with this senseless result. And what do we see afterwards? Afterwards, we see just like the neighbors saw. We see Jacob lying on his father's lifeless body, hugging him, crying. Could he possibly know? Could he possibly know at that moment? I mean, he's crying. He obviously knows something very bad has just happened, but at 3-year-olds, could he possibly know? Could he know as he was hugging his father that he would never get a hug back from him? Would he know, like his older brother Jorge would know if he were there, that he would never get another hug back from his mother? We see this scene through the eyes of those witnesses, the neighbors who look through the door and see this scene. And what do they tell us? They tell us they are just hit by the sadness of it. From the very start, this case has shocked us and horrified us. This case comes down to the same question I posed to you in the opening statement. What are we going to do about it? This case is not about vengeance. This case is about justice. What are we going to do about it? And really, as you think about the evidence now, and we're going to get into several of these things that you all saw, you all got to come up yesterday and look at all this and put your hands on it. You've heard all the testimony from the witnesses, and you've seen all these items. Really now, almost 2 weeks later, and over 2 years later, really, are we any better off now? After everything that's been done, after everything that's been collected, after all the interviews, after all the pictures and everything, and after coming through and doing all this for 2 weeks, are we really any better off? Do we have any better grasp on this than we would have back in January of 2013? Not really. Because it's senseless. It makes no sense. We have two teenagers kicking in a door and committing a violent, vicious, and brutal killing of two absolutely innocent people in their own home in the literal middle of the night. Literally, it was the middle of the night. In their own home. Their home that was deadbolted. You saw the photograph. They even had their door deadbolted, and it was still crashed open. What do they leave behind? They leave behind 2 kids now to grow up without their mother and their father. So what are we going to do? First of all, we're going to call it what it is. It's a cold-blooded murder. I'm going to say it again. This is nothing but a cold-blooded murder. How do we know that? That's in the law. The judge, as he told you, the way that this process is going in our schedule as we're getting to it, after we finish these arguments, he's going to read you these instructions. I believe he's actually going to give you a copy of these instructions that you will read. And you will see in the law, in the language that he gives you, why this is nothing but a cold-blooded murder. Because what you're going to hear is what should be obvious to you. There are actually 2 ways that this is a murder. 2 different legal theories, if you will, 2 legal avenues to reach the same result. It can be first-degree murder under the basis of malice, premeditation, and deliberation, basically what we call the premeditated murder. It's also murder under our felony murder rule, which means that when you commit a murder during the commission of another felony, in this case the burglary, then it's also first-degree murder. They both apply. And the judge is going to instruct you that when you find the defendant guilty of the first-degree murder, you need to indicate under which basis you're finding it under. But I'll argue to you, and as the court will instruct you, you're able to find both. And I think that's exactly what you should find, because the evidence supports both ways of being first-degree murder. But the clearest one is that first one. Malice, premeditation, and deliberation. What does it mean? Basically, someone's killed. We really aren't disputing any of that. That the way they were killed was at the hand of another person from an intentional assault. Again, really not much issue there. All right. There's an intent to kill, and what he's going to indicate is that there has to be this premeditation and deliberation. Premeditation, that is, the defendant formed the intent to kill over some period of time, however short, before the defendant acted. And that the defendant acted with deliberation, which means the defendant acted while he was in a cool state of mind. This does not mean there had to be a total absence of passion or emotion if the intent to kill was formed with a fixed purpose, not under the influence of some suddenly aroused violent passion. It is immaterial that the defendant was in a state of passion or excited when the intent was carried into effect. But here's an even better paragraph for you, because this is where you come in. Remember, you all are the fact finders. The judge takes care of the law, gives the law to you. You all take the evidence and have to find the facts. Neither premeditation nor deliberation is usually susceptible of direct proof. They may be proved by proof of circumstances. There's that circumstantial evidence. Remember, I talked to you all about all the way back from jury selection a couple weeks ago, from which they may be inferred, such as the lack of provocation by the victim, the conduct of the defendant before, during, and after the killing, the use of grossly excessive force, the infliction of lethal wounds after the victim is felled, the brutal or vicious circumstances of the killing, or the manner in which or the means by which the killing was done. Man, does that fit this case to a T? Huh? What do we have here? What do we have here? What shows this deliberation, premeditation, deliberation? What shows this intent to kill? Well, I just talked about them bursting in that door, right? This murder was committed immediately and indiscriminately. Anybody who was in there was going to die. There was no thought of put your hands up, get on the floor, who are you? Let me see if you're this Sancho person. Where's hamburger? Nothing like that. Just crash the door open, and as the defendant even did in his statement, boom, 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 boom. Right? Did you hear him say that yesterday? Just boom, 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 boom. And you know what gets me a lot? You may have wondered, why did we worry so much about that shot that went into the TV right next to the door? It obviously didn't strike anybody, right? But what does that show? That shot shows exactly what he did. He went in with that rifle. Again, remember, because Moises was the one who said that he was the one that had the rifle as he was coming out. So he's got the rifle, and trust me, we're going to talk about Moises, shoots and comes all the way around the whole room. He shoots the whole room. What else about that TV shot? On the other side of that TV is a corner that somebody could be standing. Right? So if you shoot all the way through, you make sure you get anybody who might be standing in the corner. It's the same thing that you see in the hall closet. Right? Those shots in that door. That door obviously had to be closed when those shots were fired. Why do we know that? Because the shots correspond to the shots in the back of the closet, and they end up going into the neighboring apartment, where Patrocinio sees dust flying, and he's running to get his 9-year-old son out of his bed, and he's on top of him inside of his room, and you've seen the bullets coming through there and then into his living room. They're just shooting behind closed doors in any places where somebody could be. You saw the pictures in the bathroom. You saw the shower curtain. You saw the bullet holes in the tub there. Did you notice that the shower curtain was pulled? And did you see in those photographs the light that was coming through some of the holes in that shower curtain? They were just shooting anywhere somebody could be. Boom, 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 boom. Right around. It was immediate and it was indiscriminate. Nobody had a chance. There's Jose, sitting on the couch, armed only with his dinner. What kind of chance did he have against this kind of firepower? How about the overkill? The use of grossly excessive force. 40 shots. 40 shots. There are 40 shell casings that are found in this house. How many are needed? Jose is shot 16 times. Maria is shot 7 times. How many are really needed, especially from a weapon like this? You heard from Dr. Nichols yesterday. Not only are there multiple gunshot wounds, there were multiple gunshot wounds that each of which would have been fatal. This case is the very definition of overkill. It's showing that intent to kill was in his mind as he came into the door. It's showing that he planned this. And if you're planning this, that means you're premeditating it and you're deliberating about it, which is exactly what the law shows you that this is: a cold-blooded murder. What was the other one you heard that the judge is going to instruct you about? Infliction of lethal wounds after the victim is felled. Holy cow. I mean, they couldn't have talked about Maria any more clear. That is just awful. And I told you about this in the opening, remember? Maria, think about what Maria has. Maria has 7 gunshot wounds, one of which is in her hand. Did you catch? It came in her right palm and out the back. All of her other wounds are to the back. So think about her as she's standing in the kitchen by that stove. Okay? The door, well actually I guess the stove would be here. The door crashes open as she turns to see what's going on, and the doorway's right there in line with the front door and sees these people. What's the first natural reaction? Boom. One shot goes into that door frame. Remember? The door frame? The bullet hole that was in there by the kitchen? Boom. Another shot right through her hand as she turns to hopefully maybe get away. Boom. One to her back, and she's down. But that's not enough for the defendant. That's not enough. He has to then walk over to Maria in the kitchen and with this weapon has to fire down into Maria, boom, 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 at least 5 times while she's on the floor. How do we know that? What did Dr. Nichols tell you? What did Dr. Nichols tell you? Those shots came in straight. All of her shots came in her back and exited her front, and they were basically straight on from back to front. That means she either had to be straight up and the bullets are going through, or she's straight down and the bullets are going straight through. Which one makes more sense, first of all, after being shot by something like that? And second of all, you have other circumstances, other evidence which corroborates that. You heard that from Detective Barefoot yesterday. When they moved Maria, what did they find? Holes in the floor. Holes in the floor. Further corroborating this exact circumstance. One shot had to have come while she's up through her hand. One shot at least has to fell her, make her go down. That's 2. That leaves 5 shots. 5 shots. And you can see it coming. Where was she shot? Back of the knee here. Further up on the leg. And then you can see what I think they said in her right buttocks. And then up into her lower back. You can see he's just crawling up her as he's walking up. And that one shell casing. Remember the one shell casing? It's between her legs as she's lying there on the floor of the kitchen. If this doesn't show that premeditation and deliberation, if this doesn't show the horrendous nature of what happened back in that house on January the 5th of 2013, I don't know anything else that will. She's lying there, face down. And it's not enough. This is just cold. It's a cold-blooded murder. And it's more than ironic, right? Did you catch that from the defendant's statement that we saw earlier this week? And he tells us that he would never hit a woman, that only a coward would do that, only somebody like that would hit a woman. Is it more than ironic that he wouldn't hit a woman, but it's okay to shoot one in the back? What's another thing that shows the premeditation and deliberation to kill and the intent to kill? Nothing was taken from the house. That's why we put on that photograph of Jose's wallet right there. This wasn't a robbery. There's no question from the circumstances this wasn't a robbery. These people weren't coming in to do anything else but to kill. His wallet's sitting right there, full of cash. Credit cards. TV is right there. Of course, they shot the TV. This might be a good advertisement for JVC. Did you notice the brand on that TV? It was still on. Did you notice the TV was still on when they took the video and the pictures? And it had a round go right through it, and it's still on? This should be a marketing ploy by JVC. But the TV wasn't taken. Did you see the other electronic equipment down there? None of that was taken. No, the rooms weren't rummaged through to pull out jewelry or finding other things. This is nothing but a cold-blooded murder. That's what the plan was. That's what the execution of it was. Nothing but a murder. But, you say, the plan wasn't to kill Jose and Maria, right? You're absolutely right. That was not the plan, was it? Who was the plan about? The plan was about Sancho, right? And or Juan, the ones who were involved in the prior assault back in December of 2012. So how can we find them guilty of killing Jose and Maria when they weren't planning to kill Jose and Maria? They didn't know Jose and Maria. Well, as you, as citizens of this state, should hope the law doesn't make it that bad, that difficult, and accommodates for this kind of situation. There's a concept called transferred intent. That if you intend to hurt somebody else, but you actually do it to somebody else instead, the intent's the same. As long as you had the intent to kill, it doesn't matter who you were intending to kill, just as long as you had the intent to kill. This is what you're going to hear. If the defendant acted under the mistaken belief, well, man, don't we have that? The mistaken belief that the actual victim was the intended victim, the legal effect would be the same as if the defendant had harmed the intended victim. If the defendant intended to harm one person but instead harmed a different person, the legal effect would be the same as if the defendant had harmed the intended victim. If a killing of the intended person would be with malice, then the killing of the different person would also be with malice. It's just a legalese way of saying this just makes common sense. You can't get away with murder just because you didn't intend to kill these people. You actually were intending to kill somebody else. And that's the difference between the murder charges. You're going to have 2 counts of murder, first-degree murder, one for Maria, one for Jose, and then you're also going to have this charge of conspiracy. The conspiracy is the agreement between the defendant and Mr. Vasquez, Israel Vasquez, to commit these murders, not against Jose and Maria, but against Sancho, David Gonzalez, and Juan Hernandez. Because that's what the agreement was for. What this is saying is the law doesn't excuse that. The law is showing you exactly what I told you this has been, and what I will continue to tell you what this is. Nothing but a cold-blooded murder. But that's not it. Remember, that's just one way to find first-degree murder. There's a whole nother way. Even if you did have some kind of doubt about this, which you shouldn't with all this, there's another way to find first-degree murder. That's our felony murder rule. If you commit a murder during the commission of committing some other felony, then you're guilty of first-degree murder as well. In this case, that's the burglary. So the judge will go through the elements of the burglary. It's a breaking and entering. Clearly have a break. This is such a breaking. I'll take care of burglary right now. This is such a breaking, right, that the whole, I mean, how many times have you seen the whole interior door frame just get shattered off? The frame just shattered off. You saw it lying on that couch in those pictures. You saw the pictures of the door, how, and it matched up. You could see, you know, the wood frame, how it came to a point. You could see where it split, you know, up at the top, and you could see in the pictures the nails coming out of the frame that was moved and stuff. There's no question that this is a breaking. The deadbolt was still on in the house. It was opened with such force that that frame shattered. So you got breaking, you got an entering. It has to be during the nighttime. Is there really any question about that? We know this is all around midnight. That's when Jose, we know that's when Jose got off work. We know that's when he was coming home. We heard from the manager of when he got off work. We heard from the last person besides Maria to see him, his coworker, remember, who got a ride home. It was the last good deed that Jose did before he was killed. Brought his coworker home, and he said that was about 11:45 or so. So we know it's going to be nighttime. This is early January 2013. Wouldn't matter what the date is. Around midnight, it's always going to be dark. Can't be with their consent. I mean, again, that's obvious. But if you really need a fact to show that, how about the deadbolt again? Right? This obviously wasn't with their consent, with Jose or Maria's consent to break into the place, and they had the intent to commit a felony when they came in. We're back to the murder. We're back to that intent to kill. We're back to that conspiracy that he had with Mr. Vasquez and this plan to get Sancho and Hamburger. They're both there. And the other thing that the law helps with is that you do not need to worry about who has which gun. Did you catch that? You don't need to worry about who had which gun. We have some evidence about that. Again, that's Moises. Again, we're going to talk about Moises. We're coming up on that. But I'm talking about the law right now. If you get back there and you start saying, well, I'm not sure which one had which one had the AK and which one had the .45. We know the weapons that were used, but we're not sure which one had which, and so we don't know maybe who shot whom. It just doesn't matter. Because there's a concept in the law that you're going to be instructed about that's called acting in concert. Acting in concert. For a defendant to be guilty of a crime, it is not necessary that the defendant do all the acts necessary to constitute the crime. If two or more persons join in a common purpose to commit whatever the crime is, the assault back in December, the burglary in January, or the murder in January, each of them, if actually or constructively present, is guilty of the crime and also guilty of any other crime committed by the other in the pursuance of the common purpose to commit that crime or as a natural or probable consequence thereof. Okay? You'll hear it from the judge. You'll get it in writing. You'll be able to read it yourself. Again, it's legalese. It's just a long, formal way of saying, this ain't right. You can't just walk in and have the same intent and the same purpose as somebody else. Here's a good way to illustrate this. Let's say it was just one gun. Let's say just one gun was used. Okay? Two of them go in, but only one gun is used. Does it matter? Not a bit. Because as long as both of them went in with the same intent and had that same common purpose to carry out that intent, which was to kill, it wouldn't have mattered. They each would have been guilty of the first-degree murder. That's the law making common sense for you. It doesn't matter, really, who had which gun. But they make it easy. They make it easy. We know we have two guns. We know it. There are two different shell casings in the scene. They're each shooting. You don't need to worry about if Moises went into the house or not. It wouldn't have mattered. As long as he was there and had that common purpose, he's guilty of this crime. That's acting in concert. And the key to acting in concert is that common purpose. Remember, Moises says he had a different purpose going over there. Again, we're going to talk about Moises in a little bit, whether we believe that or not. But that's the evidence that you have in front of you. So where are we? We have all these offenses. You're going to be getting 20 pages of jury instructions to listen to and to wade through about these charges. And in the end, a lot of this won't be what you need to worry about. Why? Because the crimes are obvious. I think from the very beginning, I think the defense even said it in their opening statement. These crimes are obvious. There's no question that all of these crimes were committed. There's no question that there are two murders. There's no question that there's a burglary. There's no question that there's a shooting assault back on December the 4th. There's no question that there are some conspiracies to do these acts. He's just saying it wasn't him. So in the end, the crimes are all there. This is going to be for you an all or nothing case. It either is or it isn't. He's either guilty or he's not. What does he say? It's not me. Moises did it. Moises did it. So let's talk about Moises. Could Moises have done all this? Is Moises involved? He is most certainly involved. And the investigators, Investigator Barefoot and the rest of the sheriff's office knew he was involved very early on. And they were looking for him, and they were looking to talk to him, and they were getting statements from him, and his name had come up. His name came up as soon as they got to Pablo. Remember, this was a great investigation. Remember the way that it tracked down, right? You get this case. They go to look at this case. They see those distinctive, and we're going to show those and talk about those again, those distinctive shell casings. Remember the assault before. Start pulling the information from that assault and find Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Hernandez being involved in that first assault. As they're trying to figure out how they're going to make that fit into this, Sancho calls them that next day and says, hey, I think I was the intended target for what happened there on Colonial Drive, and I was involved in that first assault. Yeah, come on down to talk to us. It's Sancho that gives them the name of Pablo Reyes. They search Pablo Reyes' name, find out he's in the jail, so he couldn't have done the murder, pulled Pablo's jail calls. They find him talking to his girlfriend, Itzamar Gemby Estrada. Ms. Estrada then, who lives on Water Oak Drive, has her place searched, finds an AK-47 that turns out not to be the murder weapon. So they go back to Ms. Gemby Estrada and say, do you know somebody else who may have a weapon like this? Why, yes, I do. It just so happens to be the defendant, and Israel Vasquez, who not only have an AK-47, but they also have 2 45s. Right? That's how we get to the defendant, right? That's how we get there. They just followed the path. That one dot led to, remember that you heard in the interview, they talked about connecting the dots and stuff. They were just following the dots as one led to another. This is the very definition of following a lead, following up on a lead. You got a lead, you follow up on it, and it gave another lead, and you followed up on that, and it finally led to the end of the road where we find our cold-blooded murderer. Because what do we find? We find on January the 15th, 2013, our murderers in the attic with the murder weapons. But I'm going to come back to that. We started this talking about Moises. Moises is involved. No question about it. He's there at the time of the assault, and he's there at the time of the murder. Why couldn't this be as the defendant said? The defendant said, Moises told me about all this, and he was the one who did all this. Why couldn't all this be as the defendant said and be Moises? Well, let's go chronologically. Let's start with the assault. What weapon was used during the assault? What caliber were the shell casings that were found out at that scene? Which weapons were matched up to those casings that were used in that scene at Meadowbrook and Woodcrest? 2 different .45 caliber guns. One being the Haskell, the other being the High Point. The numbers, you know, all the state exhibit numbers, and then you got to see the lab reports for Agent Tanner, right? And you get in all these K1 and K3 weapons and Q29, and that's mainly done for the record, so that when somebody reads it later, you know, they can keep track of all this and they know what we're talking about. Here, for you, let's call it what it is and what's out there. The Haskell and the High Point 45s are out there at the scene. What it comes down to is the 3 shell casings that were in the middle of the street. Remember, CCBI Agent Hill talked about where all the casings were found. 3 of those casings are found kind of in the middle of the street. One's over by the blood spot over on the shoulder that's damaged, and one's a little farther over by there. So you basically have 3 by one and 2 on the side. The 3 that are out in the middle of the street come back to the Haskell. The 2 that are off to the side come back to the High Point. Okay? But they're all .45 calibers. What did Moises have? Moises had a .38. And even if you didn't want to believe Moises when he said, I had a .38, that was my .38, I think it was Sancho. One of them, but I think it was Sancho because the gun was pointed in. I asked him to describe the gun. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was Sancho. He says, I'm familiar with guns. He pointed out, describe the gun to me. It looked like a .38. So even one of the victims out there, Sancho, is saying, I recognize the gun that driver, who he later identified as Moises, I'm getting that in a minute, had and thought it was a .38. It fits, doesn't it? So he's not shooting. If he's got a .38, that means he can't be shooting out there on the December assault. Instead, what is he doing? He's using his gun. He's using his gun. You know it. You heard the evidence about it, and he admitted to it. He hit Juan with it. He says, using it like a hammer. He grabbed it by the barrel. Hit him on the head with it. Caused a gash, Juan told you. Took 8 staples to fix in his head. Still gets migraines from it. So he used the gun, but if he's doing that, doesn't that mean he couldn't have been doing the shooting? If he's holding a gun by the barrel to hit Juan, he can't be shooting it. And this is important. Why? Because of the timing. Remember, all of them say that right after he gets hit in the head, gunshots ring out. Juan even said, I'm hitting the head, I'm a little ahead, and then all of a sudden I hear gunshots and I'm down, I feel the heat, in my foot and everything. There's no time. There's no time for him to hit, and then come here and turn around and then start shooting him. He has the gun, like this, hitting. And we know that that's got to be Moises doing the hitting. Why? Because he clearly was identified as the driver. Again, he admits it, but what I'm doing for you is I'm trying to take anything Moises said, try and take what Moises said out for the moment. Just go by what the victims say. All three of them. Juan, David, and Celia. The person they all identified as the driver was the one who came over with the gun. Was the one that was in the initial argument with them. If you don't believe that, what makes circumstantial sense? They're in this white Nissan pickup truck. The evidence is, we don't have that from our victims, but there's no evidence to the contrary, that the only one who had that vehicle was Moises. So it makes sense that he would be driving it. If he's the driver, that means he's not the shooter. Because the driver of that truck is the one who gets into the initial argument. When Trigger comes out and starts fighting with Juan, the driver is the one who goes over to the window of the car and holds them there. The driver is the one who then, when Juan starts getting the better of Pablo, to go back and hit him, pistol whip him on the top of the head with the gun that he had. Even if they're incorrect about, because the question was, the person that you saw you now know as Moises, correct? Yes. But even if they're incorrect about that, what they are sure about is it was the driver. And all the evidence is that Moises was the driver. If he's the driver, that means he's involved in the fight, and he's not the shooter. Remember what the other victims talked about in there. Celia. Celia, who really, truly did not have a dog in that fight, right? They're just going to do laundry. And she's not involved in all this. You can feel somewhat for Juan, and I do, he didn't deserve to be shot in the foot like that. He didn't deserve to be cold cocked on the top of the head with the gun. But you saw how he told you how he was kind of bowing up. We had evidence about him trying to show, was it out of self-defense or out of bravado? I don't know, but putting his hand behind his back like maybe he had a weapon, which he didn't. Did that make it worse? I don't know. May have. Again, just like this whole series of stuff, it just seems to start escalating. Once they start, there's nobody that seems to be able to pull a stopgap and just stop this stupid stuff. It just keeps going up until somebody gets seriously hurt. Like on December the 4th. Like on January the 5th. But Juan's doing his things. Sancho told you that he was involved in this gang, the VDM gang, the very dangerous Mexicans. He claims they weren't really a dangerous group. They were doing it for other things. Be that as it may, whether you believe that or not, you may not feel that much for David and Juan. And I would understand that because of their involvement in this kind of stuff. But what about Celia? What about Celia just living there with her family and going to do laundry with these two? And what does Celia tell you? She actually recognized someone out there. She went to school with that person. Who was it? It was Israel. She recognized Israel out there. And where was Israel? Israel was in the truck. That brings up 2 points. First of all, every time you've heard about either the defendant or Israel, the other one always seems to be with him. We got it at the assault. We got it at the murder. We got it at the time of the search warrant. They live right across from each other. They're only, 2 months apart in age, right? Remember, was that incredible or not? Israel's birthday, 16th birthday, was January the 4th of 2013. He just turned 16, the night that the murder happened. Jonathan is 15, birthday's in March. So in January, he's about 2 months shy of his 16th birthday. They're about 2 months apart, close in age, living right across the street from each other, and every time we seem to hear of one, the other one's always there. So Celia recognizes Israel there and talks about other people being there. It's a circumstance to consider, yeah, Jonathan's there. The defendant's present. And despite what he says, at the whole first 2 hours of his statement about not being there and not knowing anything about anything, he finally admits, right, that I was there at that shooting. So at this point, you're talking about a process of elimination. Right? Process of elimination. If Pablo is in the fight and may have his shirt pulled up, which 2 people talked about, I think, or 3, I can't remember now, and had his shirt pulled up over him, but either way, he's down, he's in the fight. And Moises is the one hitting him on the head and holding the gun by the barrel. And Israel's in the truck. Who does that leave as the other outside shooter? Now, the witnesses did say there were 4 or 5 people there. But did you hear any other evidence of who that 5th person was? No. You have evidence from Moises. Again, we're trying to take what he says out for the moment, who identifies the 4. But he's corroborated. He's corroborated by Itzamar, right? Who sees the 4 of them together on that day after 7 o'clock before all this assault occurs. Does she talk about 5 people going in that truck? No, she talks about 4. So by process of elimination, who's left to do the shooting? How about the round? Again, what we're talking about here is why isn't this Moises? Why couldn't these be Moises committing these like the defendant said? This is a little one, but something to consider. You may wonder, why did I put in the picture and put in the evidence, that 140 caliber round that was found in the Durango? Remember? 140 caliber round. Seems like it has nothing to do with anything, does it? Well, once again, think about what you know was used. What we know was used was a 7.62 rifle and 2 45s. Not a 38 and not a 40 caliber weapon. This is a round found in the vehicle that Moises is using. He told you this was Pablo's vehicle. Okay. And you saw where it was found. It was kind of like in the back seat along the side. So could it have been something maybe that from a weapon Pablo had? Maybe. Could be. But it's a circumstance to consider. We now have a 38 and we now have a 40 caliber in either places or vehicles that Moises is using, showing kind of the preference of weapon he likes. It's not a 45. We'll get to his AK in a minute. Because where did that AK come from? Itzamar's place. Who brought it there? Pablo. But whose weapon is it? Moises. He tells you, I bought this weapon at the gun show at the fairgrounds about maybe a year before or so. All right. But this is Moises' AK. If this murder was committed by Moises and an AK was used, remember, the investigators thought this was it. When they found this, they thought they had it. It wasn't it. But doesn't that beg the question that you should all have in your heads right now? If Moises did all this, why wasn't this the murder weapon? Why was it this one? Which one looks better to you? Which one would have been easier for Moises to get? How about the one that he owned? Now, you can talk about, well, yeah, he did own this one. He can't use it because it'll come back to him, right? Well, isn't that what we talked about and you heard about in all those statements afterwards? Because that brings up the next point. The weapons were hot, right? Wasn't that the term you heard used? The weapons were hot. According to the defendant, after Moises committed all of these crimes, the murders specifically, not the assault, I'm sorry, the murders, he comes back to his place and brings him these guns and tells them that they're hot. We've all seen cop shows and movies and stuff, right? He even kind of explained a little bit, to the investigators of what he was talking about. Man, no, I think the phrase was, no, if they had told me that they were using a murder, the price would have gone down even further because they would have even been more dangerous to have, okay? So the weapons are hot. And yet the defendant still takes them inside. Why would he do that? If this is Moises committing this murder, why would he just willingly take these hot weapons that were used to kill people and hide them from Moises? And further, reload them. Did you believe really for a second when you heard his statement yesterday that when he got those weapons back they were already reloaded? Did you believe that at all? Where's the arsenal in this case? Where's the armory in this case? It's in the attic of 165 Montesino Drive. You saw the backpack with all the shells. You saw the bag with the shells. You saw the clips with more shells. You saw the boxes with more shells. That attic ended up having 4 guns up there. The AK-47, 2 .45s, and a 12-gauge shotgun. The attic was the arsenal. And why would it make any sense for Moises to reload the AK-47 and bring it back when he can't be associated with it anymore, when he has his own? What a waste of ammunition, right? Look at the rounds that the AK takes. He has his own AK-47. Why would he waste his ammo on a hot weapon where his fingerprints may potentially be on it, right? And put it in a hot weapon when he has his own weapon he can use these kind of rounds on that wasn't involved in it. That makes no sense that the defendant would just take in some hot weapons for no reason. Because he liked Moises? Because he's part of the same gang? What was it? I would argue it just makes no sense. It didn't happen. It does bring up the question, why didn't he get rid of the weapons, right? Well, these might just be weapons that he liked. Because remember, Itzamar had seen these guys, both Jonathan and Israel, with these weapons before, shooting them before. And they have them hid up in the attic. Maybe they felt secure there with them. Maybe they just liked these weapons. Don't know. But it really does not make any sense that Moises would give these to him and that they would hide them for Moises. The weapons couldn't mean that much to them that they would do this for Moises. So now, we hear from the defendant as we started this case and as we're talking about Moises, that Moises is now the state's star witness. That there's no evidence in this case pointing to the defendant but Moises. I respectfully disagree. And I argue to you that this is an overwhelming case that points to the defendant. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to list out what points to the defendant. And I'm going to leave Moises for last. What's the first thing? The first thing is our star. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. But as they say on TV, but wait, there's more. Right? The 45s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Here's your star. Why, in any murder investigation, is the first thing that the officers always ask about is where's the weapon? The first is safety, right? It would make sense. But what's the other main consideration that they would consider? Whoever has the weapons that did this is likely to be the person who did it. This is your star. You don't get around the gun evidence in this particular case. You just can't get around it. Those weapons matched all of these casings. Without a doubt, we have the murder weapons. Further proof? The bullets from Jose. Taken from his body by the medical examiner. Sent to the lab to compare with the rifle that you just saw and you continue to see. Absolute match. These are the bullets that had Jose's name on them. This is the star. The gun evidence is the star in this particular case. You don't get around it. And it goes even further. Because, again, like I had said before, what do we see? What do we see in these casings and stuff? The 45, right? I noticed a lot of you all open these up to look at the backs of them. So this is a casing from the murder scene at 708 Colonial Drive, a 45 caliber casing. You see the back of it, how it's all scratched off, right? That's really odd, isn't it? Haven't seen that before. But we have. Where have we seen that before? Well, we ended up seeing it before in an assault. Just 3 blocks away from where this homicide occurred, where a 45 was used just about exactly a month before, and a 45 was used, and there it is. The back, the head stamp is scratched off of the 45 casing. Right? So is that enough? Sure, it shows that it's linked, but is that really enough? No, it's not. Why? Because you still need to link the defendant to this. That's what we're talking about, right? So where do we find him? We find him hiding in an attic, and in an attic we find these guns. The high point that ends up being our murder weapon, correct? Has a magazine in it. And look at the 45. Yeah, look at the 45 ammunition that came in that high point that they found in that attic. What do you see? The back of the bullet, the head stamp, is scratched off. Is it just me, or is it just a coincidence that the defendant even had an explanation for this in his statement? And I'm going to talk about his statement in a little while, and I understand that is tedious. That was it took a long time. It was important to hear and for you to see him and stuff, but he made a lot of statements. But remember, they asked him about the scratched back. You know, what's the deal with that? It's like, I don't know, but it might be a sign. Might be a sign, like they're leaving a message saying, hey, we're the one. You see this at a scene? That means we're the ones who did this. So this is nothing but a message. They're bragging. They want the world to know they were responsible for this. So why is it any different now? The scratched 45s are constantly in this. And they keep coming up. And they keep coming up where the defendant is. This is the star. This is, you know, this case could have almost been done, on the gun evidence alone. They found the other magazine in the attic. Scratched off backs. Not all of them, right? There was another magazine that had some that weren't. There was a box of some that hadn't been scratched off yet. But isn't it odd that the ones that are loaded into the gun, most, if not all of them, are scratched off? That's the star of the case. That's what shows it's the defendant involved in this cold-blooded murder. And you know, they'll bring up, they asked and they'll bring up again things about fingerprints or DNA or anything else that might be used to identify the defendant here. The question I'll have for you is to consider is what difference would it make? When you hear that kind of stuff, you need to think, what difference would it make? Say we got the defendant's fingerprint off of the guns. You know that you heard them that they brought them in for fingerprinting stuff. Nobody's aware of any kind of results or anything. But just say we did. He already put in his statement that he handled the guns. He hid them for Moises, right? So that would explain his fingerprints on there. What if by some reason we were able to find, you know, a fingerprint on some of the cartridges or some of the casings that were in there, even one of the casings from the murder scene? Well, he said, I did load guns. I used my shirt, you know, to load it in there, so my fingerprints shouldn't be on there, but he admitted to loading weapons, you know, before, so that wouldn't have made any difference, right? Couldn't get the victim's DNA off of anything of him, right? Because these are shots at distance. Huh? Dr. Nichols was talking to you about that. You know, what would have been great is to get some of the victim's DNA on the defendant to show that he was actually in there, right? That's not going to happen because they're shooting, and they're shooting at distance. They're not going to get any kind of blood or DNA from the victims on them. The shoe prints. They'll bring up the shoe prints. We're not aware of any kind of result that came from there. There were three shoe prints or shoe impressions that Agent Smithy talked about that were found in that scene. Not aware of any result, but you've heard all the people that are walking in through there, and really, even if you get a shoe print, how specific was it going to be? But here's the big thing about the shoe prints. Even if it was his or wasn't his, let's give him the benefit of the doubt here. We match all three of those shoe prints and they're not him. Does that make any difference? Is that a reason to doubt the rest of this case? Is that a reason to ignore the stronger evidence that is, frankly, right in front of your eyes? Where is the defendant found? The defendant is found hiding in an attic at 165 Montesino Drive. The operative word there is hiding. Right? There's no other reason for him to be up in the attic at that time. He's hiding in the attic. Where's everybody else when they go on the search warrant? Israel's trying to get up in the attic with him and trying to hide. Nobody else is in the attic. Nobody else is apparently hiding. So what are they trying to hide from? Or maybe more appropriately, what are they trying to hide? These are the acts of a guilty mind. They do have something to hide. They have to hide themselves, and they have to hide from the truth. Because that's what was knocking on that door that day. We can say the law caught up to them, but really what caught up to them was the truth. And they had to hide from it. And when did those guns go up? Remember, again, think about our bigger point here. We're all talking about points which point to the defendant and not to Moises, right? When did those guns go up in that attic? It had to have been earlier. There was no time in the execution of that search warrant for them to load all of these items up in that attic before those deputies got to that back bedroom. Remember, they got there fast enough that Israel couldn't even get up before they had to, and remember, the other big thing with it, again, showing the hiding, what did you hear from Sergeant Landmark? Not only is this attic access in a closet, which you heard from Mario, which again I'll talk about from his statement, but you heard from Mario is the bedroom that Israel stayed in, okay? But not only are they in this closet, but the closet door is locked. So they're trying not just to get up in the attic, but they're trying to delay or keep other people from finding them. It's clear evidence, clear circumstantial evidence that they are in fact hiding. They have to break down or break open, kick open the closet door just to see Israel there on the chair trying to get up into the attic space. So there was no time to get the weapons up. That means the weapons had to have been put up there earlier. Again, the premeditation, the deliberation. This isn't just a spur. If he wants to say, well, you know, and he'll say, what in his statement, I think at the end yesterday, he talks about, well, yeah, Moises gave me these weapons back, so I went and I hid them in the attic. I put them up there earlier. You know? Either way, he's either taking weapons he knew he used in a murder, or he's taking weapons that he knew Moises used in a murder, and he's hiding them in the attic. Either way, it's the hiding in the attic. It's the hiding. It's the acts of a guilty mind. These are things that point to his involvement and his guilt in this particular case. How about the motive? The motive clearly was the first shooting. And here's what you're going to get, I believe, because I think we've heard it before. This shows that it's Moises doing this. Because it was Pablo, it was Moises' brother Pablo who was losing that fight. And Pablo's the one who's in the gang. And he was trying to either get gang rank or get into the gang or get in with his family or make his family proud, his older brother proud or something like that. So it all shows that it was Moises. Moises had the motive on this. To which I say, where's the evidence that the defendant and Jonathan were not involved in this as well? Right? Every time we hear, right, about how does Itzamar know? Remember, Itzamar is the one who gave us the names of Jonathan and Israel. How does she know them? Through Pablo. Who does she see with Pablo on December the 4th of 2012? Moises, Jonathan, and Israel. Who does Moises tell us is there on January the 5th of 2013? Moises, Jonathan, and Israel. They're all together. They're all involved in the same stuff. So why isn't something that's good for Moises good for the defendant? He's in the same group, the same gang, if you will. We can argue whether or not he was a technical member or not of the Sereno 13 gang or the PRS gang or TLC, whatever they were calling themselves or whatnot. But you don't need to get lost in that. He's clearly with them every time we hear evidence about this group getting together. They're together. So why wouldn't the same motivation that they argue is there for Moises would not be there for Jonathan? In fact, it might be even more. He's younger. What if he is trying to get in this gang? If they're going to make the same argument for Moises, that Moises, who's older than Jonathan, is trying to get in this gang and impress his brother, wouldn't that apply even more so for Jonathan and Israel, who are younger and need to prove themselves to the leader of this little gang? The motive is the prior shooting. The prior shooting that we just talked about where Jonathan shot a .45 caliber handgun and hit Juan Hernandez in the foot. And he talks constantly about how Moises messed up that shooting and he had to go fix it up. Really? Was it Moises who messed up? Was it Moises who messed up, or was it the defendant who messed up and needed to clean up his own mess? His own statement. Oh, and with the prior shooting, because this is part of the defendant's statement, right? This is another one of those ironic things that you just hear and you just kind of flag in the back of your head. When he was talking about Mario, right? Oh, poor Mario, right? I mean, on January the 15th, 2013, for about 2 hours, I'm sorry, on the 16th, by the time he starts getting into this conversation with the, Investigator Barefoot and Sergeant Jarima, he starts putting all this on Mario. Why? Because he's from Mexico? Right? He's from Mexico, dude, so he's got to know about or have access to all these guns and be involved in all this kind of stuff and everything. He just starts trying to put everything on Mario and doing all this stuff. And so he was asked at one point, well, have you ever worked for Mario? If Mario's doing all this and running drugs and guns or whatever out of his house and actually trafficking in drugs and arms and guns from Mexico and Texas all the way to here, are you one of his employees? Are you running for him? Are you helping him in any way? Does he pay you and stuff? It's like, no. The boss needs to do his own work to get respect. Do you remember that comment? No, the boss needs respect. And the only way the boss gets respect is you put in your own work so that they see that you will do it. Really? Boy, was that a window into his mind? Is that what was going on the morning of January the 5th of 2013 when that door to 708 Colonial was busted in? Was he trying to earn his respect? Was he trying to be the boss? Where was he going? But his statement has a lot of stuff. He finally admits to the assault. And when you think about his statement, think about it this way, you're going to hear, and rightfully so, how Moises did all kinds of bad stuff and didn't give truthful, statement. Remember, the first statement to Investigator Barefoot was back on January the 11th and said he didn't know anything about all this, right? And then afterwards, he comes back in March and April and says, yes, I actually was there, and here's the people who were involved and identifies and everything. Well, and he's going to say, so, you can't believe Moises because he's changing his story. We just went through 5 hours of that, right? For the first 2 hours of the defendant's statement, he did the same exact thing. I don't know anything about any shooting. I think it must be all Mario. Those guns, and the weed and everything in the house, all that's Mario. This is all him. I don't know anything about it. Then you get about halfway through it, and then the story starts changing. Well, okay, you can give me protective custody. I'll tell you what I know about it. Well, clearly he knew something about it beforehand, right? So he's doing the same exact thing. So does that mean you shouldn't believe him? Does it mean you shouldn't believe Moises? No, what I'm just saying is you need to take all these arguments and apply it all the way around. I think the evidence shows, and I think the evidence, and argue to you the evidence does show, they're all involved. They're all involved. And they're all minimizing their roles. And they all have been untruthful at times about their involvement and the other people who were involved in this matter. I think that is clearly shown because you hear what they say and you do what any normal person does, and you're going to do what the judge will instruct you to do in these instructions about judging the credibility of witnesses. Is one of the things that you do is you see if that testimony makes sense. And if it's believable, if it makes sense with the other believable evidence in the case. Well, we have all kinds of other believable evidence that doesn't rely on anything that comes out of Moises' mouth. So compare what Moises says to what the defendant says. Which one makes more sense when you compare it with the believable evidence? But on any argument they have about why you should not believe Moises, think about whether or not that same exact argument would apply to the defendant as well. He's just as involved with these people. He's got the same self-interest involved. But some of the other things that he says and he does are absolutely incredible. First is the comment about the crime being done perfectly. Was that a Freudian slip? Because that was such an odd comment to make. Remember when they were pressing him about, are your fingerprints or DNA going to be found in this crime scene? Or are there, okay, how about you're telling me Moises did this? Is Moises' fingerprints and DNA going to be found there? No, the crime was done perfectly. Wouldn't you think the normal answer would be, I don't know, I know Mon's not going to be there because I wasn't there. I don't know whether Moises would be there or not. I would think maybe because he told me he was there. No, the answer was, no, you're not going to find anything there because the crime was done perfectly. Doesn't that sound like a boast again? The same thing that we're getting from the shell casings. You know? The crime was done perfectly. How would you know the crime was done perfectly unless you were there? He had to have been there. Did you hear the detail he gave? He says, I don't think you can get around this. And it leads to the next point, which is the sketch that he drew. He just gives too much detail about these homicides on Colonial Drive from January the 5th to not have been there. In one side, at one point of the interview in the statement, he's talking about, well, no, Moises only told me the guns were hot. He didn't say a murder was done with them because then they would be even cheaper than they are. But in the next breath, in the next couple minutes, he's talking about Moises, how Moises goes into excruciating detail about this murder. About the child being there, about where each of the victims were located, about the layout of the house. Who does that? First of all, who goes even to your fellow member and gives explicit details about the murder? Wouldn't you just come in and say, even if this is your fellow gang member or friend or acquaintance, whatever, just say, yeah, I popped someone. Yeah, I killed somebody. Yeah, we kicked in the door and shot him. Right? Are you going to sit there and explain to them where each room in the house is? Because yes, there's no question. This is scribble scratch, and you saw him draw this on the video. But isn't it strangely similar to the floor plan that was done later, and that you've seen in the video and in the photographs? You have a door that comes in. There is a back side door by the kitchen. The biggest one for me is, there's this hall closet door that he's looking down the hallway, and that the female victims through this open doorway. There's no door there. That's the kitchen doorway. He's describing the kitchen doorway. He's giving you a lot of detail about the description of the inside of 708 Colonial Drive, and says he gets all this from Moises. Who is going to commit an act like this and go through that kind of detail to your friend, to any friend? If he's worried about holding hot weapons and he wants to be protected because he doesn't want to know what's going on with the weapons, why would he sit there and tell him about all this? That makes no sense, and certainly would not be in Moises' interest, because now he's making a witness against him, right? It's too much detail. So much so that you can do this. And did you see from the video? He didn't hesitate. Think it's a place that he says he's never been in. If you've never been in a place and someone describes it to you, yeah, my house has this big kitchen. Off the kitchen there's a small bathroom, and then there's a hallway and a couple bedrooms down the side. Okay, can you draw that for me? No, I just know that there's a kitchen, there's a hallway, and a small bathroom and some bedrooms off the hallway. He immediately took the pad and started drawing, saying, here's the front door marked DR, here's where the male victim is, here's where the female victim is, here's a hallway with the door went in, here's a back door over here, here's an open door with the kitchen. And he says he's never been in there. How do you do this just on the word of somebody else? You can't unless you've been in there yourself to see it for yourself. And when we talk about, and when we talk about statements, we have more than just the statements that you saw on the screen. You saw yesterday the notebook that was found in his room and read some of the things that he apparently wrote in that notebook. It's got his name on it. Okay? Does he admit to anything in these writings? And they do. They appear to be like rap song lyrics or something like that, correct? No. But what does he show? He shows just this eerie similarity to what ended up happening on January the 5th of 2013 by both the weapons used and the way it was done. Did you catch some of those lines that he talked about in this notebook? I got a .45 fully loaded clip in my hip, right? What do we find up in the attic? 2 more fully loaded .45 clips up there. These haters, remember he talked about the haters in the statement? Because who would be, if you didn't do this, who did it? Why would somebody be saying you did it? I don't know, they just may be haters, right? So these haters ain't going to get in my way because they get sprayed with the AK. Man, how can you be any more graphic than that? You're going to get sprayed with the AK. What happened inside of 708 Colonial Drive on January the 5th, 2013? Jose and Maria got sprayed with an AK. You know us foes from Texas don't play, get sprayed for being in the way, right? Again, this goes back to motive, right? Who got in the way? Who got in the way was Sancho. And when they tried to get Sancho, who got in the way? Juan. Now the motive is on this murder to go clean up that mess. So you're getting in the way, and we're going to spray you with our AK. We're going to the place where we think you are. As everybody has known from the beginning, they were just wrong. They were just wrong. Banana clips going off on you. I mean, it goes on and on. Could today be the day that you die from this 45? Oh. I bring that drama to your effing front door. Kick in the door. I'ma blow that sticky icky. Kick in the door. What happened? What happened on January the 5th at 708 Colonial Drive? You talking any effing day, I will spray till you hit the floor. I stay strapped up and trained from the best like the Navy SEALs. Where did we hear that before? What was his dream? What was his dream in his interview? Remember that he went over with Sergeant Jarima in the first part of the interview. He wanted to go to the military, specifically the Navy. He started talking about SEAL training and buds and all that kind of stuff, right? He's telling you about it as well in his own writing. I don't play. I'll be first bust, first to spray anybody in my way. I pack tech and hit you in the neck if you even disrespect my set. Hit in the neck? Do y'all remember the pictures of Jose? Do you remember Dr. Nichols' testimony yesterday from his autopsy? He had 2 shots right through his neck. Don't mess around. These dead bodies are on the floor. Again, this clearly appears to have been done before the murders happened. But doesn't this show either his intent, his plan to do this, and more importantly, doesn't it show the identity of the person who was actually in there doing this? When he gives you kind of a picture, a pre-murder picture of what's going to happen, and then it actually happens. It's evidence to show the identity of the person who's doing it. Again, why are we talking about all this? Because he says it's Moises. And we're trying to show you that the evidence is showing otherwise. The evidence is pointing to the defendant. Itamar. Saul. She's the direct link, or kind of the witness link from Pablo to the defendants, right, to both Jonathan and Israel. Itamar sees them with these guns. She talks about these kind of guns beforehand, knows them through Pablo, involved with the same group, sees them on the same day again that the assault occurred. She is the connection. And even if you didn't want to believe her, because now she's going to be involved with Pablo and kind of them, remember, that's kind of backed up by a whole other group. You have corroborating evidence, basically, from the women who are involved in a lot of this stuff. Because you have Itamar from Moises and the defendant's group and Pablo's group talking about seeing this group beforehand, but then you also have Celia at the time of the assault, because she knew Israel and she recognized Israel. So in a way, they're corroborating each other. Itamar says Israel was with Jonathan and Pablo and Moises when they left that night. Sure enough, Celia runs into him later and says, I see Israel in the truck. Again, they're always together. Why is there a difference to doubt that this circumstance would be any other different than the other circumstances that you've heard about in this particular case? They're all, and when I talked about Itamar being involved with that particular gang, did you notice in the interview, maybe not so much what was said, but how it was said, every time Pablo came up in the interview? And specifically when he was confronted with the possibility that Pablo might testify in this case. Really? Really? Pablo might testify? What is Pablo going to testify about? He seemed to be much more worried about Pablo than what was going on in his own life. Who was actually controlling or calling the shots here? And what's leading to the motive that's going behind all these things? Why wouldn't Pablo cooperate? So that leaves Moises. Moises is the direct link, the direct evidence. I think these weapons are the direct link. But he's the only direct evidence that's going to put this murder right in the lap of the defendant in Israel, right? Because what does he say? I picked them up. I brought them to 708 Colonial Drive. I thought we were going to scare Sancho. I parked my car at the stop sign. I started hearing gunshots. I pulled up my truck to the front of the residence. I get out. I'm coming through the yard. As I'm coming through the yard, I see Jonathan come out with the AK. Following right behind him is Israel coming out with the .45. I startled Israel so much, and he had the gun down, he fired off a shot. But remember, there were 2 shell casings that were found out there. Is one shot from the doorway at the very beginning and one the shot from outside? Or did he actually come out and get startled and fire 2 quick shots? Don't know. But it does corroborate what you're hearing from Moises. There are .45 caliber shell casings from this weapon that are found outside on that stoop. And you heard from Moises. I startled, and I mean, that's a detail. What would that matter unless that actually happened? I startled Israel as he came out of the house, and he popped off a shot. We got a casing outside. He's the one that puts these in their respective hands. They were already charged and arrested at the time he finally identified them. Remember, Investigator Barefoot talked to him on January the 11th, and he said he didn't know anything about anything. On the 15th and 16th of January is when the search warrants are done and the interviews are done, and the defendant is taken into custody. You saw it yourself. So when Moises comes back in March of 2013 and gives his statement with his attorney after being charged in the assault, like he talked about, and he starts giving all this stuff, the other ones have already been charged. If he's the star, then why was he charged before Moises ever gave him up? It's because Moises is not the star. Moises is the icing. The cake is already there. Moises is just the icing, and he gives you the insider, the actual person who was there to tell you an eyewitness account from someone inside. Does it come with problems? Yes, it does. It always does. He's charged in this. He's culpable in a lot of the things in here. He's lied in statements before, just like we're seeing in all the other statements from the people that are involved in a lot of these things. But he is not the star, and he is not the only witness. He is just the icing on top of the cake. Flip it around. Flip it around. Let's take the defendant's word for what it is. Moises did this. Moises did this. And we believe the defendant in his statement. And so we go and we arrest Moises for this murder, and you came in here for jury service last week, and this is now Moises Reyes' trial. And Moises is sitting over there. And we put Jonathan on the stand. And Jonathan tells you what you saw in that statement. What would you think? What would you think? What would Moises be saying that would be just absolutely obvious? Why am I here? The man that you have testifying against me was found hiding in the attic with the murder weapons. And just because he says, I did it, I'm being tried for these murders, you got him with the actual weapons. Flip it. See which one makes more sense. Which one is more believable with the evidence. Because that's what it comes down to in this case. Moises is corroborated by more of the believable evidence than the defendant is. In the end, Moises gave it up. You heard his story. Which version, the one you heard from the defendant during his statement back in January, or the one you heard on the stand here and in prior statements that he gave, which one makes more sense with the believable evidence? Which one is more corroborated? It's clearly Moises. And I am not saying that Moises is a good guy or even a great witness. I'm just saying it is what it is. He's the one who gives more believable evidence. So in the end, what do we have? In the end, the facts all speak for themselves, right? Investigator Barefoot said it multiple times. You saw it I saw it at least 3 or 4 times. He stopped and told Jonathan everything they had. We've got this assault, we've got these scratch casings, we've got you hiding in the attic, we've got these weapons, they're going to be matched up to the murder weapon. I mean, they basically were giving my closing argument for me that you saw all the way back on January the 16th of 2013. The same facts that they're talking about then are the same facts that you know now. So if the facts are the same, then what are we doing? Nothing has changed. The point really is, what are you going to do about it? The evidence is there, and the law is there. Oh. Remember what the defendant said. God gave us this life to live, not to take another one's life. Right? And then he also says about the child. The child in the house was going to go to heaven anyway. He had nothing to do with this. He didn't deserve to die. Why wouldn't that apply to Jose and Maria as well? You have to wonder. You really have to wonder if you believe any of that from the defendant. Do you really believe that in this hailstorm of bullets flying throughout that house, that he suddenly had this moral epiphany that made him spare the child's life? Or is it simply because of all the shots fired, he simply ran out of ammunition? Which is truly ironic, because there were 2 rounds left. 2 unfired rounds found in that house. Which one had Jacob's name on it? So I wonder again, what are we going to do about it? Nothing but our duty. Nothing but our duty like we have sworn to do. What indeed? Thank you.
Mr. Cutler. Members of the jury, it's now 5 minutes till 12, and rather than starting an argument and having to stop in midstream to send you all to lunch, in my discretion, I'm going to release you for lunch now and ask you to return at 1:15. That's an hour and 20 minutes, and when you come back at 1:15, we will resume with the closing arguments from the defense. It's very important that you continue to follow the rules. Please leave your notebook there in the chair. Don't talk about this case among yourselves or allow anybody to talk about it in your presence. Don't formulate any opinions. The time for that will come later. And don't conduct any type of independent research or investigation. Be very careful about having any contact with anybody participating in this case or having contact with anybody that's here in support of those people participating in this case. And I will again remind those that are present in the courtroom that you are not to have any contact with any members of the jury for any purpose at all. So with that, I'm going to release you folks until 1:15. I'm going to ask everyone else to remain seated while the jury is excused.